Hey YouTube, just wanted to introduce the new project to the channel. It's a 1998 Honda Z50R. I've been searching high and low for one of these for quite a while. Had a couple of them in the past and really regret getting rid of them. They're really fun bikes. So I was stoked when I found this one locally for a pretty good price. Did just have the typical like 50 quirks to it. The front forks were bent. This one's not in that great a shape. It has a good bit of rust, like somebody left it outside and the weather got to it a little bit, but overall it's in pretty good shape. The tank is actually super clean. I'm not sure if they resealed it at one point because it has zero rust inside, so I'm actually really happy about that. Done a couple things to it so far. Aftermarket throttle and throttle cable, obviously. Pro taper mini bars, billet TV triple clamp to accept the KLX 110 forks with adult springs, TB parts billet +3 swing arm, 330 millimeter shocks off of Amazon. They actually seem to be pretty good quality. This is a bike for me, so want it to handle weight of an adult pretty well. It's just going to be something that I can rip around the neighborhood and get into the green belt behind my house when I get the itch to go riding. But it is going to be getting dark here pretty soon, so I'm going to actually put a lighting stator on it. It's an aftermarket unit. It should be pretty similar for XR and CR 50 and 70 since they're essentially pretty much just the same bottom end. So we'll get into it. This is the stator and flywheel that I chose to go with for the Z50, as well as the flywheel puller tool that I'll need to get the OEM flywheel off. I chose to go with this stator and flywheel because it seemed to be one of the better ones I could find. It on the surface seems pretty similar in quality to something you'd find on a reputable pit bike part place online. And it also had good reviews, so I'm going to go ahead and try it. The one thing that I did notice that it's not going to be necessary for the Z50 is this wire here. It's the only one that doesn't actually go into the stator. If you just chop off this piece here, it's just a rubber plug with a brass contact on it. If you open up the left side case of the Z50 motor, where the flywheel and stator would be, on the top right hand side, if you're looking at the motor from the side, there's a black rubber plug, which this fits into. On some bikes, more specifically bikes that were used for the street, so like closest application would be like a ZB50, there would be a little metal arm or detent piece, whatever you want to call it, that would contact here and essentially ground this out. So it would ground this wire and it allows you to run a neutral indicator light. But we're not going to worry about it, so I'm just going to take this off. You can just pull it right out of the harness once you've snipped it off and throw it away. I'll go ahead and explain what all the wires on the actual harness are, just that way. I don't think it's common knowledge. So the white and yellow wires are what I'm installing this stator and flywheel for. This is what's going to provide current to charge a battery, run lights, any accessory like that you want to add to your bike. That's what these two are going to do, so we'll worry about those later. The black and red and blue and white are going to be what you use to actually make the bike run. The black and red is going to actually provide power to the CDI, and then the blue and white is going to be a signal. Whenever this pickup here gets a signal, it'll send it up to the CDI and tell it to send current to the coil and create a spark. This green wire, I'm not sure exactly what it is. If you follow it down to the stator, it actually just goes to this little bracket here that holds the harness on there. It just grounds there, so I don't think it's necessary to keep it on there. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it, and when I start working on the bike, I'll fire it up, let it run for a little bit. That way I know the carb is primed and everything. So once I replace this, it should theoretically just fire right up. If it doesn't, I'll try grounding this to the frame or a bolt, and if that works, then I'll have to see what I do about that. If it just starts up, I'll go ahead and just snip this off the screen wire. It's also probably a good opportunity to show you this tool here. I just went with the Motion Pro tool. I've had some of their stuff in the past, and it's usually pretty good stuff. You can buy something cheaper. I just like this. It was only like $15, $16 on Amazon as well. But it's nice quality. It even comes with a pack of grease. And the tool itself, it's a 27 millimeter left-handed thread. So basically when you install this into the flywheel, instead of turning right to tighten it, you would turn left. So I'll just put it on there real quick to show you guys the way that it works. So you screw that in counterclockwise until it seats, and then this bolt in the center will actually, I'm not sure if you can see it, will actually push out through this hole on the crankshaft. So essentially when you tighten this, it should be pulling it off of the crankshaft. So the first thing we'll want to do is actually get the bike running. Go ahead and turn the gas on, choke it. It was a little bit noisy at this point and you couldn't hear me over the bike, but basically all you want to do is let it run for about 30 seconds or so. That way the oil's a little warmed up and it's easier to drain. Now that the motor's run a little bit, you want to put a drain pan under it. And not this bolt, it's the tensioner bolt for your timing chain, but this bolt you'll want to undo. It's a 15 millimeter socket. Make sure you've got the, oh no, there isn't a washer actually, never mind. Just go ahead and let that drain out. Once it reaches the point that it stops flowing out, actually find another block that you can put under the kickstand and have it just stand straight up, and you'll see that there's a bunch more oil that comes out. Once you've gotten to a point where it stops draining, take a paper towel and wipe down the threads and end of the plug. That way it's nice and clean. And mine actually did not have a drain crush washer. So luckily I have a couple on hand because I have a couple Toyotas, and it's actually the same 12 millimeter. So if you don't have one, you can just go to a parts store and ask for a drain plug washer for a, I've got these for 2019 Toyota Tacoma and a 2013 Toyota Tundra. So either will fit. I like to also give a wipe down to the mating surface on the case here. That way it's nice and clean. Go ahead and thread this guy in. and tighten her down. It's not crazy tight, just want to make sure the washer is nice and crushed. For this next part, I put it up on the stand just to make it easier to work on. Start off by removing the shift lever, just a 10mm. That slips right off. And then there's going to be 3 bolts on the cover for this flywheel. Those are 8mm. That front one is not going to be able to get the socket on there, so I'm just going to use a regular ratchet. And should just come off just like that. Next up is going to be this center nut on the flywheel. It's a 14mm. And there is a little washer on there, so just make sure you get that out as well. It's a little tight in there, so magnet could work also. Come on. There we go. Next, you want to pull out your flywheel puller tool that you had earlier. Make sure you unscrew this guy as far as it goes and screw this in. Remember, it's a left-handed thread, so you'll screw it into the left until it stops. And I'm gonna grab just an adjustable wrench. Put that on there. And this center bolt here is going to be a 17mm, so I'll go ahead and turn that in. There, and it'll actually usually pop off the taper like that. Should be able to just pull it off. There's the OEM flywheel and stator. What I would suggest doing next is actually taking a paper towel or clean rag and actually cleaning all up in here. Get rid of as much debris as you can. That way when you take off this stator plate, you're not getting any of that gunk into the motor. That's why we drain the oil. Going to go ahead and disconnect the wiring coming from the stator and pull this little rubber boot out of here. There's 2 bolts that secure this backing plate on here. It's going to be this top one and this bottom one. They are just regular Phillips heads. Don't have an impact driver, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is get just a sturdy screwdriver. And what you want to do is make sure it's well seated in the hole. Put a little bit of twisting force on it and give it a couple whacks so that it comes loose. Take them out the rest of the way. And it will take a little bit of persuasion, but you should be able to just pull the stator right off. What's important to note is that there's 2 O-rings, tiny little O-rings. One goes here behind the Phillips head screw and one goes up here. Make sure you put those off to the side. You'll want to go ahead and take a paper towel and just clean the hole inside here where this outer O-ring is going to ride in there, as well as the crankshaft. Everything's nice and clean. And then gonna go ahead and take just a tiny little bit of grease, and I mean tiny, and just put it on one side of those O-rings. That way they just go ahead and stay in place. And then we are ready to put the stator on. I would go ahead and put just a little bit, use some of this, a little bit of oil to lubricate this outer O-ring here. That way it doesn't get hung up when you're going. I'd make sure that this seal in the center is pushed all the way in and it's flush. That line where these holes are going to be on there. That way you're don't have to twist it and stuff too much. We'll go ahead and push it into place. Take a little bit of wiggling back and forth. What I'm gonna go ahead and do is on the bolts that actually secure the stator backing plate to the motor, I'm gonna put just a little dab of blue Loctite. So go ahead and just snug those down as evenly as you can. Alrighty, so next up is going to be the little rubber bushing that goes up here. It is a little too big to go in there, so what I'm gonna actually go ahead and do is keeping as much material as possible, I'm going to cut off this little unused extra piece, basically right about there, keeping as much material as you can so that we can seal up this hole here. And this is what I ended up with. It's not the prettiest cut, but it'll do. So just put the sheathing back as far as you can there. You want to run this little rubber grommet all the way back up here. The biggest thing is that it fits in there nice and tight, which it does. You are good to go. Next up, we're going to be putting on the flywheel. You want to make sure that you match up this little keyway with the keyway on the crank. Push it down as far as you can. Don't forget that washer. Put the nut back on. In order to tighten down this nut on the flywheel, it's only about 20 foot-pound of torque. I'm gonna actually use an old ratchet strap. What you wanna do is wind it. You're gonna be tightening it clockwise, so you wanna wind this around the flywheel counterclockwise. You want just a couple turns on there so it kind of tightens up against itself. So kind of something like that. You want it to be on the flywheel, and every time you go around, it be on top of what you've already put on there. Give just a couple turns, and the idea is that when you go to tighten it down in a clockwise motion, this is going to tighten up on itself. When you get to a point where you've gone around a couple times, you want to try to secure this hook here onto something. I'm going to go with the swing arm, and see, if you put a little bit of force on there, it's not going to move. You can also, if this keeps on moving, when you put a ratchet to it, grab a screwdriver, put it through the peg, and just barely into the flywheel there. There you go. Tighten down. There is just one problem. So the black and red terminal is a female, and it's a male up here, so that works just fine. And the blue and white is a female, where this is a female. So we need to go ahead and snip this one off. We'll snip off as little wire as possible. Remove some of the protective outer sheathing here. Grab the wire and twist it up. So just like that. And you're gonna use a male bullet connector and crimp that on. Put the protective plastic on there and you're good to go. So we'll hook that up. So blue and white to blue and white, and black and red to black and red. And now we can put this off to the side. Before we go ahead and start up the motor, we gotta fill it back up with oil. This is what I use, Rotella T4 1540. I've used it in all my bikes. So we're gonna go ahead and undo the oil cap here. Put that off to the side somewhere clean. This bike takes about 0.6 quarts, which is about 19.2 ounces. I went ahead and pre-measured about 19 ounces. Grab a funnel, put that in there, and add all of this. It's just a little bit less than what we would need to put in there, but it's enough to get us started and make sure everything's working with the stator, and then we can go ahead and come back and make sure that our oil level is correct afterwards. It's gonna go ahead and start the bike just to make sure that it does. Awesome. Just some notes before we wrap this video up. It'd be a good time to kind of clean here by the sprocket underneath here, as well as the whole main surface. Something I did not mention earlier was that this bolt and this bolt are actually going to be the same size, and this one down here is going to be shorter. That way you don't mix those up.